Hey everybody, welcome to the Morning Devo with Bo. Super glad to be back in the house and sharing a little bit of the word this morning. And for those that are maybe new to the devotions, my name is Bo Willett, and I'm a pastor over at Calvary Christian Fellowship of Tucson. And my archives of all my devos are actually at my personal YouTube page, so it's Bo Willett, and it's right there, and you can check it out. Right today, we're actually in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, and we go over kind of the Bible. We just go through the Bible and books of the Bible, and we kind of just break it down real simple, but really pull out some cool gems for us to really think about in a day. And coming from a secular progressive background, I know have a little bit of a unique take on a lot of the Bible, meaning how it relates to us and how it relates to our world. And I was one of those guys that really bashed the Bible growing up, and then I just read it, and boy, it really changed my life. Made me definitely look at a lot of the narcissistic tendencies that I have as a human being, and really reflect too on what happens to us when we die. And let's face it, death is eternal, no matter what state it's in. And so that being so true, probably the most reasonable thing to do is to kind of seek out what is true, right? About that jump to come that's in all of our paths. So I just got done a memorial out, just hanging out with a bunch of really wonderful friends from my past, especially my teen years out in California, and that was just a blast. So many things I could share about it, but our brother Guy passed away, and man, it was really sad in a lot of ways too, just reflecting on his early life, and just I guess early, what I mean is his early departure. And that's, and so I'm kind of glad I'm in the book of Ecclesiastes chapter 3 right now. It's kind of perfect actually for, the occasion of a memorial and, pondering. Here we have the preacher, Ecclesiastes, preacher. Yeah, that's right. It means preacher. We have the preacher, speaking, sharing. And he shares from an interesting perspective of life, contemplating life under the sun, the sun, and how he sees a lot of vanity, and what is the meaning of it all? Those are the big questions. Even his use of God is interesting, and you don't see a very eternal kind of perspective. But it's very just generic. And we saw that at the end of chapter 2. So let's get into chapter 3 and kind of check it out and see what it says. So here we go. It says, "For everything there is a season, a time for every activity under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to harvest, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build up." I think you guys have heard this one before. "A time to cry and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to turn away, a time to search and a time to quit searching, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be quiet and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace." Now, I could stop there and that would be the end, right? And we kind of look at that famous section there, and which has been put into, of course, a more contemporary song. And we could just go like, hey, that's right, But let's read on a little further and see what we get from the preacher here. It says, "What do we really get from all their hard work? What do people really get from all their hard work?" And so the preacher's still stuck on this idea of futility of work, that even the distribution of wealth, man, in the end, it just really doesn't matter. It seems like there's just so much randomness and so much, you work hard and then it goes over here and goes over, your wealth gets distributed over here. It seems like, there's a lot of different things that go on, a lot of different scenarios, and he's wondering what's the point of it all? What's the reason for everything that goes on? And then he gets into this, there's a time for every season, right? A time for every activity under heaven. And he sees just the variety of things that we do. We do this, we do that. We search, we don't search, right? We gather stones, we don't. A time to work, a time to cry, a time to laugh, all these things. And he sees, he ponders, what is the meaning of it all? And a lot of people's use of God and thinking on this life is very much like the preacher. And that's what's neat about this book, is that I think a lot of people in our world very much look at this. What is the reason for it all? God must have a purpose for it all. God must do this. Hey, if you live right, God will bless you. If you don't live right, God will take it all away. It's a very interesting way of looking at even God, and it's kind of, in a sense, I think, almost like an ignorant way of looking at God. And what I mean by that is sometimes it's just a lack of knowledge. We don't understand maybe something. Maybe we don't understand. We're not looking at things from an eternal perspective. We're not seeing we don't maybe understand the character qualities of God. So someone might be, looking at the world, but they've never read the book of Leviticus. So they don't understand how God is to be approached and why God's to be approached that way. And if they don't understand the book of Leviticus, then they're gonna only see a part of things, if that makes sense. They're not going to understand the full picture. They're not going to understand the reason why. They'll just kind of assume something. I guess God blesses those who are good, and I guess God doesn't bless people that are not good. I see some of that. So, maybe those that are really good get blessed, and those that, those drug people, they really not blessed. They're bad. They do drugs, that kind of thing. And we don't realize that there is an atonement that's a sacrifice. There is a way to approach God, an offering, right? And that there's an issue with God and human beings which results in the absence of God from our world, from seeing God, which makes us so very much, if you will, very agnostic in a lot of ways, right? Is there a God? I don't know. If there is a God, I see this. Maybe there is. Maybe there's not. Who knows, right? Kind of idea. How are you today when it comes to the way you view things? Are you seeing things with more information of God? Or do you see in your life still a lack of understanding what God and who God is, what he does, how he moves, those kind of things? That's something, to look at yourself and go, hey, what is my day like? Is my day filled with just what maybe I want to do in a day, and in the sense of just kind of the feeding of the bodily appetites in a day? Or is it, is there some really searching for who God is? Really looking at the claims of people who have claimed to know God. One of them is Jesus. Jesus claimed to know the Father. And this is the radical claims of Jesus. He said, he who has seen me has seen the Father. He said, I've come to reveal the Father. And so, do we look into those claims of people who have, said some pretty radical things about their relationship with the deity, Or do we just go, no, and I used to do that, no way, those guys are nuts, blah, 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 that kind of idea. And just go about my business talking like the preacher. Oh, yeah, there's a time for this and a time for that. And, everything happens. Who knows what's going to happen? But seems like there's seasons, in life. And that's how it goes, kind of idea. Where, it seems like it'd be best if we didn't say, hey, that's just how it goes. That's just how it is. Instead, we have a better understanding of this is why it's the way it is. This is why things are. This is why God is hidden from human beings. There's a reason why God is hidden, why God doesn't show himself, why Jesus comes, or why God comes in the form and takes on a human body and would, in a sense, veil his glory. Like what, there's reasons for that. There's things to look into. The most rational thing would be to look into it and not to ignore those things. And so the preacher here stuck in this kind of life under the sun mentality. I guess this, I guess that, And so it's a real challenge for us, to look in, hey, am I really looking for answers? Or am I just satisfied with kind of what looks like the way things are, So let's move on. So a time to laugh, time to cry, all these things. We're all famous. This is all famous stuff. This is all, things you guys have heard before. This song anyway. And then he says, what do really people get from all their hard work? He sees that kind of vanity in it, right? Like, this is just vain. This is just vanity. There's no point to this. 1 minute you have a lot, 1 minute you don't, you can see him just kind of reeling. Sometimes you cry a bunch and sometimes you don't. You're totally happy. So what do people really get out of it all? I've seen the burden God has placed on us all. Seems like it's kind of a burden to just be here and just live life. What a heavy burden that we have. And this is how he's coming at it. The preacher's coming at it is, again, it's not from a very good, I think, understanding of God. I think it's a very narrow way of looking at things. But he sees like God, very, very burdensome, very heavy. Right? I don't see a consistency on things. I just see that everything's kind of vain. There's a lot of vanity. Just in the end, what does it really do? What is it really amounted to? And yet it says, yet God has made everything beautiful for its own time. Interesting statement. Yet God has made everything beautiful in its own time. It's kind of a neat statement, I think, a neat sentence. It's one that you can look at that song, right? A time to laugh, a time to cry, and you can go, oh, okay, I see where he's maybe going with this. And that God has made everything beautiful in its own time. There's a reason for every little thing. The time to cry, the time to laugh, the time to gather, the time not to, all that. And that's true. There is, I think if you've lived enough life, you see kind of the ebbs and flows of it. And that some things feel consistent and other things don't feel very consistent. It seems like there's a time where you're doing this and then there's a time where things shift and you're totally doing something different, And I think we've all, if you've lived enough life, you've experienced that. Especially like in your health, where there's times where your body's doing great. And then there's times where your body's not doing so good. And all of a sudden your body's got some issues. And it says that God has planted eternity in the human heart. That's interesting. The preacher reflects and goes, man, it's so interesting that God has made everything beautiful in its own time. It seems like there's a purpose in what God has created and how we go about things, and even the actions that happen throughout a lifetime, that there is purpose in it, he's saying, contemplates that. And then he says he has planted eternity in the human heart, which is a great statement. But even so, people cannot see the whole scope of God's work from the beginning to the end. Can't seem to see exactly what God is doing. It just seems very vague to me. And yet I have this eternity on my heart. I love that. Solomon reflects on, God, when I look at things on the earth, I see just meaningless. Yet I know God has put eternity on our hearts. We ponder these things. It's interesting we ponder eternity. What a interesting concept that is, right? Animals don't seem to ponder eternity, but yet we do as human beings. We ponder the afterlife. We think of the afterlife. We think of heaven. We think of hell. We think of, the eternal energy or whatever you conjure up, right? We think of those kind of things. We tend to contemplate. There seems like there's an eternity that's placed in our heart, that we were made for eternity, something greater than just where we're at today. And we have thought about this over and over and over. And this is why, you go to college and you might take a philosophy class and you might go, whoa, and you start pondering some of these things. But yeah, we have a mind that really has eternity in our heart. I think today too, just in the devotion, is my mind on eternal things. And it's interesting that Jesus, when he talked, he said, my world is from above, which is really cool. I mean, Jesus just had this way of talking about the eternal realm, if you will. I'll use that term, the eternal realm or heaven, in such a, such a knowing way. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I love those statements of Jesus. It's like, hey, man, that's my hometown. That's where I've hung out my whole, I'm using human terms, but my whole life kind of thing. And I find that really interesting, because when we go back to our hometowns, we tend to know the streets and we want to show people our homes and kind of where we lived and things like that. And Jesus has the same kind of vibe in talking to his disciples about heaven, which I find really fascinating. And we see even into the New Testament where it says our heart and mind are to be on things above. So instead of so much on what the preacher's doing is looking so much on the planet, on the earth, we are to, in a sense, go more vertical and think more up. So maybe today what can help me is if I start thinking more up, more vertical than so horizontal, right, on all the circumstances and the things that go on in this world. But instead I start focusing up on my Savior, my Lord, where he's at. It says where he's at the right hand of the Father. And, I start thinking about Jesus and I start thinking about eternal things. Hey, let me have my heart in heaven. That's where I want to be. Let me have my heart set there. And not so much here, but there. That kind of attitude. And so, God has set eternity in our hearts. Everywhere in the world, people think about the afterlife. Very interesting, right? Everywhere you go. Any place, any people group, eternity has been placed in the heart of humans. Interesting proof of the existence of God, right? That's an interesting proof. If there is a God, obviously we would be yearning for God, right? If there wasn't a God, if there was no God and we just, evolved, then why would we even yearn for a God? I mean, where would that come in? But we do yearn for God, and that's so true. When someone dies, we cry. We feel like something's not right. He died too young. Seems like an injustice. You know why? Because we are always looking to the perfect. We're looking to the eternal, right? There seems to be something that is wrong in our world. And so I conclude there's nothing better to be happy and enjoy ourselves as long as we can. So he says, hey, we can't figure out God. And because we can't figure out God, I conclude that there's nothing than to be happy and enjoy ourselves as long as we can. Can't figure it out. And people should eat and drink and enjoy the fruits of their labor, for these are the gifts from God. Hey, we should just eat and enjoy and just be satisfied in that, because that's really all there is, And, there's some truth to that, is learning how to just enjoy what we can enjoy on the planet, where there's enough hatred on the planet to really not enjoy anything, right? I mean, just look at the news every day. Oh man, it's a nightmare. Every day there's so much destruction and so many things going on. Just talked to a friend, talked about, I think, 5 murders in our town, in our city, the last week. That's his job. He works in that kind of field, but you just hear that and you go, whoa, man. That's crazy, but that's life in our world, right? And Solomon says, yeah, if you have to seek out the good. You got to see, how to be happy in this world. A lot of people are looking for happiness, right? And, can people really enjoy the fruits of their labor? Do they really see them as gifts from God? Are they really seeing things from an eternal perspective? Or, people can't enjoy their stuff, even though we got so much stuff, we can't enjoy it. Why? Because we're still so focused on the horizontal. We're too focused on the here and now. I got this, but they got that, and that bums me out. And so now you're not happy at your stuff because you want that stuff. There's always more. There's always things, you can get just your focus on the wrong spot. Now the preacher realizes that we should just enjoy ourselves as long as we can. And he sees that that's important, and that's something that is a gift of God, to be able to enjoy the fruits of our labor. And I want to do that today. I want to enjoy the fruits of my labor. I want to realize that it is a gift of God, and that it's not just me doing it, but that God is in me, working through me. God is, in a sense, using me. He's intimate with me. And to think through that, to ponder that. And it says, and I know that whatever God does is final, forever, right? Oh, that's kind of cool to know. Nothing can be added to it or taken from it. God's purpose is what people should fear, is that people should fear Him. What is happening now has happened before, and what will happen in the future has happened before, because God makes the same things happen over and over again. Wow, how interesting, huh? I mean, what a great statement. And I know that whatever God does is final. And that's something to ponder. Yeah, what God does is definitely final, that's for sure. If God would be logically the deity, He would be the greater. So whatever God does, of course, it's definitely stronger than us, that's for sure. And what He does is final. Whatever His purpose is. Remember, He's already said, I don't know the purpose of God, right? God's purpose is that He should fear Him. We should fear Him. He knows that. So the preacher kind of reverts back to something that he knows, and that is, hey, we should fear the Lord. And this is kind of neat, because this is Solomon, right? And Solomon wrote the Proverbs. And the Proverbs talk about the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So Solomon reverts back thinks back on what he knows. And hey, if you don't remember anything, go back to what you do know. I mean, what do you know about God? What have you read about Jesus? Have you focused back on those things? Kind of come back just to in a sense, the basics. And I like how Solomon does that here. God's purpose is that we should fear him. Yeah, fear him in what way? Well, I always like to think of electricity, right? You love it, but you got to have a reverence for it, right? You can't just treat electricity trivially, because man, you'll get electrocuted, and that is not good, right? So you love it, you love what it brings, you love its touch, right? What it brings us, but you also have to have a good, strong reverence towards electricity. And so, do I have a good reverence towards God? Do I, when I think of God, do I have a reverence towards God? Do I also think of his many blessings? The fruits of my labor, that God gives me the ability to even work. Those kind of things. So what is happening now has happened before, right? It seems like God just has us in a hamster's wheel, just going in circles over and over and over again. And I kind of think that's good to think about too. And that the world is filled with just repetition. People talk about progress and being progressive. But really, obviously, in our day and age, we're not progressive. Like, we just go back to what was before. That's all we're calling progressive, which is very interesting, right? We think we got these rights. We think this is right. We think that's thing. We think this is, now that we're doing this, we're more progressive than before. When really, no, there was already a culture at one point that already did that. There was already people that's how they lived. Solomon observes that and says, man, nothing really is new, right? What will happen in the future has happened before, because God makes the same thing happen over and over and over again. Seems like God is just, got us in the old rat cage kind of thing. And remember, this is his thoughts on, hey, it seems like God, it seems like God, it seems like God. A lot of that kind of talk, right? And isn't that how so many people on our planet talk about God? It seems like this, it seems like that, it seems like this, and not really looking into it too much, just a lot of it seems like, right? It seems like there's no God. If there is God, it seems like that's kind of vain, those kind of things. So I noticed that under the sun there is evil in the courtroom. Yes, even in the courts of law, they are corrupt. Wow. That sounds a little bit like our day too, right? I said to myself, in due season, God will judge everything, both good and bad, for all of their deeds. At one point, God must have to judge all this stuff, The courts are corrupt. Who can trust the courts? What's the purpose of the court? Kind of vain, kind of idea, right? And then he says, I also thought about the human condition, how God proves to people that they are like animals. For people and animals share the same fate. Both breathe and both must die. So people have no real advantage over the animals. How meaningless. Wow, he sees us just being like animals, just doing the same things. Breathing, dying. Really not much purpose, not much progression, not very progressive, right? Both go to the same place. They came from dust and they will return to dust. For who can prove that the human spirit goes up to the spirit of goes up and the spirit of animals goes down to the earth? Hey, how do you know where your spirit's going to go? The preacher says, man, I don't know. And he's looking at life under the sun. He don't see, when things die, you don't see if their spirit go anywhere. He didn't. So he just goes, man, I don't even know. I mean, who knows? Seems like the same fate, right? You see how there's a lack of information that the preacher's always has when he's talking about God and what God seems to be doing, right? It seems like God's just got this thing going around in circles. It seems like this. That's why it's great to give this book to people who are in that frame of mind. It seems like that, because here you have a guy who's writing in the Bible, who's writing a book of the Bible, who's at a place in his life where he's really struggling. And instead of really looking into things of God, he's kind of just pondering what seems to be. And a lot of people do that. And it's easy to get spiritually lazy, for sure. But it's not rewarding to be spiritually lazy. It's not rewarding to be spiritually lazy. No, we need to get our workout on when it comes to our spiritual lives. Both go to the same place, and they came from dust, and they will go to dust. And says, so verse 22, so I saw that there is nothing better for people to be happy in their work. That is why we are here. No one will bring us back from death to enjoy life after we die. Sad, right? Seems like when we die, we just die and that's the end. There is no nothing after. There is no come back. You're not going to come back to the earth, that's for sure. That's what he observes. And he says, hey, you might as well just, work and enjoy your labor. And I guess that's it. And so the preacher, Solomon, obviously had times in his life where he really just struggled with his concepts of God and how God was moving on the planet, in the world. Had a lot of questions maybe about God, and maybe just got very lazy spiritually in his life, where the answers were before him, but he just didn't seek them out. And instead he ponders and he pontificates of what seems to be the case, when a lot of times what seems to be the case isn't the case. And that's true, man. That's why it's cool to read a book like Freakonomics, about economics, because, what seems to be the situation isn't the situation. And there's a backstory, so to speak. And it's just, you can't see it. But it's really happening. It's really there. And so sometimes economic books are like that. They kind of show you the hidden things that are going on that are real. And Solomon, is an example of what we, in a sense, don't want to do as Christians. We definitely don't want to get lazy, spiritually speaking. We got to work it, and we got to open up the book. We got to read. We got to think through things. We got to find answers. And we have so much beautiful material in front of us. Why be lazy about it? You could watch all the TV in the world, but that's not going to help you spiritually speaking. We have to temper, our enjoyments with, understanding more about God, and that will turn into our enjoyment, believe me, and turn into our joy as we seek Him. So Jesus said, seek and you shall find. The question always comes is, do we seek? So it's one thing for me to think about this morning is, how am I seeking the Lord? When Jesus said, seek and you shall find, am I really seeking? Am I really searching? Going after it? Those kind of things. Or am I just satisfied with what seems to be the case? As Solomon does. So, very cool chapter. Again, pondering chapters, right? Stuff you think about and you ponder. But there's answers. There's answers for these things that Solomon is talking about. And we just need to get on our treadmill, so to speak, spiritually and go after it. So you guys have a great day. And thanks for being a part of this, where we get our minds focused in the day, get our minds focused upward, right? Not so much horizontally, but vertically. So you guys take care. Bye-bye.